So next in our utils, I'm going to create a new util class. And it's going to be an object. Let's call this constants, like that. Very good. And I'm going to create a few constants here. So the first constant is going to be a base URL. So what is the base URL? So this is important because we're going to use this with our HTTP client, which is Retrofit. So our base URL is going to be anything from, oops, let's go back from there, HTTPS, all the way to our org, like this. We're going to add the / as well. So I'm going to just add it there, like that. Okay, that's our base URL. I'm going to need that. And then I'm going to create const val, and this is going to be our API key. Now this should be your API key, so you will add it there. Okay, very good. All right, so next what we want to do? Next, we are going to set up the actual weather API. So what is this? So let's go to our network. In our network here, I'm going to create a new class, Kotlin class, and this is going to be an interface. Call this weather API. So as an interface, I want to make sure that this is indeed a singleton, because I don't want this to be creating different objects or different instances of itself. Just one should suffice. And inside here, I'm going to create, of course, I'm going to use our retrofit. This is the beauty. Our retrofit allows us to do certain things. So retrofit, because we already added retrofit in our project, in this project here, as a form of dependency, I can do something like this. I'm going to say say get. Look at this. You can see this get is from retrofit to HTTP. Very good. So what this allows us to do is as follows. We can pass certain values, certain parameters, so retrofit can pick up those values, those parameters, and do what needs to be done. In this case, to go fetch data. Right? All of that is done in the background without us having to do anything manually. Okay? So for the value here, say value, I'm going to pass what? Well, I'm going to pass the rest of our, if you look closely here, we said that the base URL is all the way up to org, like that, and then the value I'm going to pass is going to be all the way, all of this, right? In fact, way before the exclamation point there. So all of that is going to be what we're going to pass there. So it's a route per se where retrofit will know to hit in order to get the information. Okay, there we go. And then, of course, this is going to be inside of a suspend, or not inside, underneath or on top of, underneath a suspend. This is going to be on top of suspend function, which is going to be get weather, like this. This function will need to receive something, right? Or in this case, it needs to return something, right? What is that it's going to be returning? Well, it's going to be returning this entire payload, as we saw earlier, which is all of this. And what is all of this, quote unquote? All of this is represented by this object, which we renamed just a few minutes ago. If we go back to our models, or model, there we go, there's weather object. So this weather object encapsulates all of this. In fact, to make things even better, I'm going to rename a few things here. So instead of weather X, this is going to be, let's call this actually a, let's change the naming here. So this is going to be, let's rename, refactor. That's going to be weather item. Okay. And this is going to be weather object. This is just renaming everything So that way we don't have issues. So weather object. I think this is probably the best way to mimic everything. Okay. Should be good. So now what we saying our weather object is going to be this, which means it's now going to mimic this whole payload. That's what we're going to be returning. All right. So that means then, okay, let's go back, get rid of all this in our weather API. I'm going to say that this is going to return a weather object. Now, in order for us to be able to go get something using Retrofit in this case, this get weather will need to have a few parameters. What are those parameters? Well, those are going to be the query types. I'm going to say at query. Remember, all of this is Retrofit. So make sure you get the query from Retrofit like this. And I'm going to pass the values that I want to query. In this case, it's going to be a string Q. Where is that coming from? If you look at when we are looking to pass in a query, there is an exclamation point there and then Q. So that's exactly what we happening here. So we say the Q, the query, passing the Q. Well, what is the name going to be? Well, this is going to be query. Look at that. It's going to be a Retrofit query. And we know it's going to be a string type that we're going to be passing, which is going to be, again, remember, it's going to be whatever we pass here to query. Portland, Moscow, any city you want. Okay, so that is the setting up we're doing here. So in that case, then what we need to do next is pass another query. At query as such, remember, Retrofit query. And in this case, I'm going to pass units, which means I want to look at the end here. Units has to be the same name that has to be passed along, right? This is very important. And so for units in this case here, I'm going to say it's going to be what? Units. And it's a string as well. And because I want to make sure that there is default value here, I'm going to say I want to be imperial as the default unit. Okay, we need to pass something else. Yes, we need to pass the actual app ID. So let's say query, again, Retrofit. And remember, its app ID has to be exactly this name here, app ID, exactly as it is there, right? So for our query there, I'm going to say app ID, exactly the same. App ID, again, it's going to be a string. And in this case here, I'm just going to go ahead and pass our constant, which was our API key, I believe. I think it's say constants. There we go, our wonderful constants from our app, right? Utils. Make sure to get that one. I'm going to say API key like this. Okay, so this weather API interface is going to be used with Retrofit to be able to know exactly how to get the information. When the get weather is called, it's going to know that the base URL we created earlier is going to be called that, and then we are going, in fact, that base URL we haven't created yet, but this is the second structure that is needed, the function, right? So we have this path, if you will, to daily, and then we pass the Q for the actual city they want to add, and then it's going to be retrieved as a variable. And we pass the units. In this case, imperial is going to be the default, and app ID, of course, is going to be the API key that we added in our constants. And of course, it's going to return a weather object, which indeed is all of this. All right. Okay, so we're not done yet, but at least we're making good progress.